The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the Bliss Business Podcast, where we explore how empathy, connection, and purpose transform business from the inside out. I'm Tullio and joined by Mike today. A Harvard Business Review study revealed that leaders with higher emotional intelligence outperform peers in key areas such as decision-making, collaboration, and resilience. Yet, many executives continue to undervalue emotional intelligence, treating it as a secondary to technical skills. Today, we're exploring how emotional intelligence not only shapes leadership, but drives organizational success. We're very excited for our guest today. Mike, would you please introduce our guest?
Oh, I'm delighted to, Tullio. So happy to have a chiropractor too on the show today because, I had a chiropractor change my life for the better. But yeah, that's a story for another time. Yes, our guest today is none other than Dr. Ron Stotts. He's a 3-time best-selling author with a PhD in psychology and a doctor of chiropractic. And with over 5 decades of exploration into both ancient wisdom and modern psychology, Ron has guided thousands of entrepreneurs and executives into higher levels of conscious leadership, which we know is one of the critical pillars of conscious capitalism. So I know our audience will be quite interested in your thoughts today. Now, through his books and workshops, and even the one-on-one meetings and mentoring that he does, he helps leaders move really through those challenges, embrace self-awareness, which is sometimes one of the hardest things for a leader, and of course, unlock their greatest potential. So Ron, we are so delighted to have you on the show with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Ron, you've spent decades blending psychology, neuroscience, and ancient wisdom to help leaders grow. How do you define emotional intelligence, and why do you see it as so critical in business today? Maybe give us a little history on how you got here too, from your personal journey.
Well, my personal journey was one of being kind of a rowing champion and jock kind of guy. I was in the Marine Corps and thinking, okay, I got it all figured out. I had a beautiful little girlfriend and everything was cool. And in the Marine Corps, I ran into a big reality check and realized that it was not just another, athletic event. I was actually learning to kill people. And in that moment at the rifle range at Camp Pendleton, they threw up a human silhouette in front of me, and my little 19-year-old mind went, oh. And I literally, it's the only time it happened in my life, at least at that point, where I just stood up and threw my rifle into the mud and knew I was absolutely in the wrong place and I was not the right guy to be doing this. So that was my life-changing moment, and I had to go on that research or figure out, kind of taking everything that I had learned and throwing it away and looking for what my values are. Who am I? What do I want? What is important to me? And that's really been my journey. And it's been a great journey. I've certainly met amazing mentors along the way. And I think it was really just getting to the point, I helped AT&T through their divestiture back in the 80s. And I had been executive VP of Intergame Corporation at the time, and we had designed all these workshops to help them really shift from a monopoly to 5 for-profit organizations. And at the end of that, they just watered those attempts down so fully that I just got fed up with it and left. I literally went into private practice as a psychologist at that time. But as my desire to really create a more conscious and caring world developed, I really saw that leaders, especially leaders of large organizations, could really not only have a huge impact and lasting impact on the organizations, but they could also, on a societal level, really change the world that we're living in. And I happen to have a skill, an ability, a developed ability to help people transform their lives, to become more conscious leaders. And so I thought, okay, that's what it's about. That's what we're going to do, is see how many conscious leaders, conscious organizations we can create to create a more conscious and caring world. Yeah.
What incredible recognition. And way to, I think really make that search and not just sort of, get on the treadmill of life, right? That so many get on, but to really be able to find your path, that's wonderful.
I love what you said about having a responsibility with society at work. We actually had a similar conversation with Gary Ridge, who was with WD-40, previous CEO of WD-40, about how people, they go home and they talk about their job and they're so disengaged and unhappy. And the children are listening to this and they're like, I'm not looking forward to going to work. And then we wonder why there's so much mental illness and drugs and alcohol, because we're just constantly talking negative about what the future might look like, and then wonder why the community is so disengaged. It really is an opportunity in the business world where we spend most of our time to impact people in a positive way. So I love hearing that, because it resonates deeply. It's something I've really given a lot of thought of in the past year, of like, there's a responsibility in this. Thanks for sharing that. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'd say it's one of the more wonderful things to be able to help a younger person, right? To be able to mature beyond their years and bring in higher emotional intelligence, or develop that muscle, so that they, affect the world in a positive way. But yeah, it's sort of turning to maybe some of the individuals that you've worked with, Ron. I'm sure there have been some very consistent or common challenges in their development and growth. So you've obviously worked with entrepreneurs and executives that have been at different stages of the growth cycle for an organization, right? Not just themselves. What are some of those common challenges that leaders face when developing emotional intelligence? And then how do you kind of get them, beyond that?
Well, I think what I see consistently, and when people come to me, usually they're up against it because I do very deep work and it is transformative. But what's going on is they're always on that initial call. They're always telling me about these outside problems with people, problems with manufacturing, problems with marketing, problems with just the organization in some form or another. And it's really fairly simple to get them to begin to recognize that all of those outer challenges are really a reflection of an inner challenge that's within them. And, that they've been leading their organization from that top-down, authoritative, controlling place due to fears within themselves, as an example. And so once they recognize that, I need to really look within for that, what is the problem, and also there, of course, a solution, they begin to recognize, due to my questions and processes that I take them through rather quickly, they recognize that, this is from my childhood. This is something that, I didn't even know was an issue for me. And that's when they begin to recognize, again, through the work that we do, is they recognize that in their childhood, they wanted love and acceptance more than anything else. So to get that love and acceptance, they hid away all the parts of themselves they didn't feel were acceptable, hid away any feelings that weren't acceptable to feel or acknowledge or express, and built up those things that were acceptable so that they can get that love and acceptance and make it into adulthood. And so often that program for getting to optimize the amount of love we're getting is really begins to run our life. We get addicted to it. We trust it. And we get into our 20s, our 30s, 40s, and still even later, much later, I see them still playing out that old limited program for getting love that's really based on fear. And it's also based on, leaving huge valuable parts of themselves behind to be accepted by others. And so the work really begins with supporting them in really healing that backlog so that they can begin to really learn to accept and love themselves. That's really the core of it. And in that process, they become more self-aware. And in the process of becoming more self-aware and more self-accepting, they begin to become more confident. They become more authentic. And they become capable of really being more vulnerable with others, which allows others to trust them more. And that allows them to really create a more vital, cooperative, collaborative environment, certainly in their homes, but in their work environment too. And of course, that's what results in greater productivity and profits. So everybody wins.
Right. It's a win-win-win, right? It sounds, as you were speaking, the thought came to my mind about, what got you here isn't going to get you there. And almost this image of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where you make it up at least to the third level, but you can't really punch through to the higher conscious, levels, right? There's things that are holding you back.
Yeah, it resonates so much. That I can see your commitment to neuroscience. I was exposed to it long ago because I kept repeating these cycles, and I was like, the plans are right, tactics are right, but I can't get through them. And you learn about the impact your beliefs have, beliefs that don't serve you have on your ability to actually execute on things. And I often equate it to this idea of the baby elephant tied to a pole. It tries to break free, but it can't. It's not strong enough. And then it becomes a giant elephant and it can break free instantly, but it doesn't even try because it believes it can't. And that's often those traumatic beliefs that hold us back. So, in helping people, in helping organizations who often struggle with embedding emotional intelligence beyond leadership training. So there's some who have decided, okay, there's value in this. Let's do some training. Let's get our leadership team to adopt emotional intelligence. But it's really a systematic, the benefit is when you make it system wide, right? So what are some of the practices that you recommend in making emotional intelligence part of the company's culture? What's worked for you over the years? What's the secret sauce?
Well, it really has to start from the top, or whoever is willing to be a leader. And, oftentimes, I'm thinking of a fellow who has 5 9-figure businesses that I was working with about 5 years ago. We started working together, and, he was just micromanaging everything in all organizations. And so the shift had to take place with him recognizing that everything that he was doing to try and protect himself and control others was really just, those were the tools that he had adapted in his childhood. And, what's interesting is the ways we protect ourselves in our childhood become the ways that sabotage us in our adulthood. And of course, our relationship with ourselves is reflected in others. And so that was just, being satiated throughout his organization. So when he went through the work with me, within a month or two, he literally, I remember the first thing he said to me is, well, I hear about this love stuff and I don't love myself and I'm doing well. And I was like, oh God, here we go. But it was really within a couple of months, he'd fallen in love with himself. He was restructuring his organizations. Within a year, he doubled the value of his 5 9-figure, 3 of his 9-figure businesses. So he really saw the shifts that could take place. He sent me, I think, 5 of his C-suites. 3 of them then became CEOs of several of his different organizations. And, that's a great story in itself, but he continued that journey. He went through my more advanced programs, and he flew me down to the Bay Area about 2 months ago, and because he was about to go through another big launch and a big transition. And basically the process is really one of becoming more self-aware, becoming more trusting, becoming more deeply connected within yourself. And, that 2 or 3 days that I was with him more recently, he's doing a great job. He really is. He's developed neurologically really integrated whole brain thinking, but he's also accessing what I call big mind, which is really where you go more into a silence to access the best of who and what you are. And, so that 2 or 3 days that we spent was really about, you're doing great. You're doing fine. You've created the teams, the people you're mentoring. You don't need to be hand-holding them at this point. You need to be letting them, run a little bit so they can gain confidence in their ability. You've got this solid relationship now with your wife that you thought you were going to lose. You've got your 2 sons here that are involved in your organizations that you thought you would never, be able to reconnect with. And so he just, and it's about breathing, to be honest with you, because when we're not comfortable, when we're anxious, we're not breathing. And that sends a signal to our body that we're in fight or flight. That sends a signal to our brain to shut off higher level thinking, and, really puts us in, I've got to run at any moment or freeze. And so it was really a matter of talking him and guiding him into the next level of consciousness that he was clearly prepared to evolve into. So when people come to me, they talk about all their challenges. All they're telling me is, these are all the indicators that I'm seeing that I'm ready to evolve. They think they're problems. I see them as opportunities. I congratulate them, to be quite honest with you, and I sincerely do that.
Wow.
So it's, and this fellow, he went through a double knee surgery, which is, God knows why anybody would do that at the same time. But he's launched his new business, and it's been, I can talk about money. The money now is I don't even keep up with how much money the organizations are making, but not just how much they're making, but how much the leadership has changed, how much the organization has changed to become a much more conscious, collaborative, cooperative organization, where really his job now is to bring out the best in everybody else. And he loves that job more than anything he's ever done before. Very smart guy, very capable. So he steps back enough. He has enough time now that everybody, he trusts his leadership teams, so that he can really use his genius to say, okay, this is what we're doing next. And that's really what he should be doing. Any leader should really be, when they come to me, I often say, what I want you to do is now put yourself out of a job. I want you to make sure whatever you're doing now, you're training other people to do, so that you can really be in that position where you can contribute on the level that you're capable. And so, when you get that sort of thinking going on, that way of being present going on, that way of being curious about what's next going on, they're designing things or even redesigning things so that they're much more supportive for not only the organization, but for society on the whole. And yeah, it's just marvelous to watch. Everybody, consciousness really determines how we see, experience, and react to everything in our life. And so the game, to be quite honest with you, is moving yourself up in consciousness. And that's what I guide people in, is that journey of becoming more and more conscious. So the game becomes, well, what level do you want to play on? And, some people stop here, and that's fine. Some people want to go to here. Some people, want to, go well beyond that and really discover who and what they're capable of being, discover the life that they're truly meant to have.
So Ron, I want to ask a little bit, maybe, continuing down this path of the different, systems and practices and rituals, is also like the measurement component, right? So how are you able to measure the progress when it comes to the emotional intelligence in the leadership and also in the teams? And then I'm also curious, it's one thing to affect the leader, but then if you got to affect like middle management and then maybe the frontline workers, that can also break down. So I'm curious, how do you measure it? And then how do you as well, you're able to ensure that it doesn't break down along the path?
Mm-hmm. I see a tremendous amount out there teaching people how to act as if. and how to act as if you're emotionally intelligent, as if you're conscious, as if you're something other than what you actually are. And that doesn't work, because as soon as push comes to shove, you're going to fall back into your old pattern. You're going to get defensive, you're going to get aggressive, you're going to get over detailed, you're going to, whatever your tendency to protect yourself is. And so, to me, my work is quite literally transformative. My process is transforming them into conscious human beings. And that allows them to not have to think about or try to be something that they're not. They know what to say because they are a compassionate, empathetic human being. They come up with ideas because they trust how to access their higher levels of thinking. And, when I'll give you a little background so you have a sense of this. This isn't airy-fairy. It's like when people come to me, their minds are extraordinarily noisy. And that's because we're only aware of about 5 or 10% of our thoughts. And those 5 or 10% of our thoughts are, okay, we want to do this, we're going to do this, I'm going to try and that. But there's that 90% of our thoughts that we're not even aware of, our subconscious thoughts that are filled with all that emotional backlog. Everything that we shoved into our inner cave as a child has free reign in that 90%. So that's where all of our saboteurs come from, our controller, our, there's about 12 main, saboteurs that we talk about in psychology. And those are, as I mentioned earlier, those are the things that we did to protect ourselves or use to protect ourselves, to become a perfectionist, for example, those kinds of things. We use those to protect ourselves as a child, but then they become our saboteurs. We don't do it good enough. We're not enough. Those kinds of thoughts come up. And, you're never in control because you're always feeling out of control, because as soon as you feel out of control, you quit breathing and you shut off your capabilities to access the levels of thinking that would allow you to see the solution that you need. So you're in fight or flight, so it's a matter of, as they heal that backlog, they literally quiet their mind. And in quieting their mind, their prefrontal cortex begins to take over as the conscious CEO of their life, rather than the amygdala, the emotional center that's run their life up to date. And with that quieter mind, the integration of the left and right brain, you begin to get integrated whole brain thinking with greater access to your imagination, intuition, creativity, all of that. And so, and that's great. If I can get somebody to that level, that's the level I generally get them to, that's fantastic. But the next level is really where they begin to graduate into where they need to be to run large organizations. There's just, today you can't go research what you should do. You've got to be in the moment and present and conscious and dealing with all the issues that are coming at you in a rapid flow. And you can only do that if your mind is quiet and you're present enough to access that big mind, that thinking that is really coming from not in here. That's from, all of who and what you are. That big mind that I'm talking about, again, just so that you understand that, usually you've probably heard of the different frequencies, the alpha, delta, theta, if we're in meditation or if we're trying to problem solve, or if we're in sleep, we have different frequencies that we access. And those all have different access to different levels of thinking. Well, in big mind, where you really quiet your mind and just put out what you're looking for, it creates an alpha bridge across all of those different frequencies. And you get to access any and all of those. So you're really accessing the best of who and what you are. And it comes very spontaneously. So it's immediate. I've been using it for 40 years now, and it's an automatic way of being, not thinking, because I don't know what I'm going to say next, to be quite honest with you, but I trust who I am and I trust my emotions, that's okay. My emotions to me and for my clients, they become nothing but indicators. They're not bad or good. They're just telltales. They're just indicators of, oh, something's going on. I need to pay attention. Oh, I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling feared. I'm feeling sad. Oh, let me breathe into that and see what's underneath that. let me breathe and see what's underneath that so that I can really see the origin of it. And in seeing that, you know what your next best step is. So my job, I don't have to do a thing in life, to be quite honest with you, other than breathe and be curious. Because in that state, I'm always going to be just taking the next step.
It's amazing, the gift of that presence, when you can listen without judgment and actually see the truth as people speak to you, and you can read between the lines. And then, people call that intuition. It's just being so present that you're not judging other people. You're just so
judgment comes from fear.
That judgment comes from fear. It's like you're not listening and judging what they're saying, because that's coming from a place. You're just so present that you're open to seeing what they're saying beyond what they're saying, and then you get the gift of seeing what's really going on. And they're like, how did you know that? Well, that's the gift of being present, is that you get to do that. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You recognize that everything that's coming into your life is an opportunity, is a gift.
Yeah.
And so it's only a gift if you're in the right state of consciousness, of course. If you're in fear, then it's going to be trepidation and reaction and downfall. But if you're in a good state of consciousness, then you're really sifting through. You see the opportunity and you breathe into and see what your next best step is, and always are able to take that next step. And it's just, what an easy way to go. I see people running multiple large, huge organizations from that place. And there's no sign of burnout, no sign of frustration. It's in fact, they're usually just having the time of their life.
Right. And I was just saying, and this is the point that is so clear, right? When you're coming from a point of fear, 2 examples, right? Because our fear is going to affect other people. Like if I'm, a CEO, and I'm very fearful of our competitors taking market share, that fear is going to drive a very specific action at that point, right? And the same thing might be, maybe I'm fearful of the board or what is going to happen in the next quarterly meeting. That's going to drive a set of behaviors, right? And then it's going to just have this whole trickle of effect if we're coming.
And that all comes from not feeling like you're enough, which means you haven't accessed, whenever you're running into some resistance in your life, it just means you need more. So you need to just breathe, go inside, access more from within yourself, become more of who and what you are, become more authentic, accept more. And that allows you, the answer to, the response, the reaction, those are all available if you're on the right level of consciousness.
Yeah.
Fear contracts, love expands. So you can't do both at the same time. You're either expansive or you're contracting, and fear is the worst.
You're either breathing or not breathing. Yeah.
It's a great point. So Ron, one topic that we love to talk about on this show, it's actually a foundational element of the show is purpose. And I think earlier you were starting to speak a little bit about when individuals sort of lose their way and are on the wrong path and sort of taking a step back. So I'm curious if we can talk about purpose for a little bit. What would you say is the importance of having a well-defined purpose? And then, how does that fall into shaping a conscious leader?
Yeah, lots of times that's one of my first questions when people come to me, and it's really a trick question because I know they don't really know. So
it's funny that you say that, because in our marketing that we do in our agency work, that's exactly the same thing. As a lot of these companies have gotten so far away from their purpose, they're not even having their purpose. So I totally agree with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, that's fine. Yeah. And so, by the end of say they finish my 2-month course, they know what their higher intention is. And that gives them that compass heading that they need in their life to feel like, oh, okay, I know where I'm going. I feel confident with that. I can do that. By the time they finish my 9-month program, and I'm not trying to market, just saying it doesn't take very long.
Right.
what happens is they know what their highest aspiration is, which is very different than your highest intention. Aspiration is what I need to breathe into. Aspiration is what I need to shift and become. Who do I need to become to reach that and create that aspiration? And that's when it's given and really is integrated into their entire life. They develop practices that keep them more mindful. They develop awarenesses and consciousness that keep them more compassionate and empathetic and caring. Their work is no different than their spiritual life. Their working out, their family is no different than it's their life. And that life is being led with purpose and consciousness, and they know where they're going, and they're excited about it. They're passionate about it. And that makes all the difference in the world. I don't have any clue about that in my own life, but no, just kidding.
I got a feeling you do.
Shoes, right? So actually, Ron, we have a question from the audience, and I think it's very timely with the conversation we're having.
Okay.
And I'm going to bring it up here. It's on YouTube. What's one practice leaders could start right away to embed more emotional intelligence into daily work? So let's give a little gift. What is that? What should they do first?
To sit with yourself for a moment and begin to start noticing when you're breathing and not breathing. And what inevitably people notice is they're not breathing a great deal, or they're breathing very shallowly a great deal. And that breathing is really what connects them not only to themselves, but to others, to the world. Trees exhale oxygen. They take in the CO2 that we exhale, they exhale the oxygen, we take that in. In other words, that breathing connects us, not only to ourselves, but everything. And so the greatest gift you could give yourself is to start paying attention and breathing. Because if you start doing that, that opens up the right brain, and you begin to all of a sudden be more in touch with your feelings. And that allows you to hopefully make the choice to take care of some of those, heal those feelings, and move beyond the limitations that they're creating in your life. And it's like, have the courage to fall in love with yourself. Have the courage to breathe and be present and discover who you are, and create that inspired life. Everybody has this life that they think about, and if only, and I could, but if I won the lotto, and it's like, no, live that life. If you win the lotto and you haven't done the work, you're going to just, the money will be gone, and you won't have any difference.
Right.
The gift that I would give you is, I got a little exaggerated or exponential on it, but it's really breathe and sit with yourself, breathe and be with yourself, especially if you could do it in nature, especially if you can do it in love. Smile, just a little smile, just a tiny little smile while you're breathing, and you'll notice all your facial muscles relax.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're going to start having feelings that are pretty cool, pretty relaxing. And that's going to open that doorway into the world of possibilities that await you.
I'm so happy you brought that point up about the smile, because it's actually a test that I do oftentimes. So I live here in San Clemente, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll run into people from all walks of life. And what I notice is, like, sometimes I'll just smile. It could be a stranger I'm walking across, the sidewalk with, or it could be somebody that I'm walking into their business or store. And I'll smile, and naturally who doesn't matter how difficult the other person is, or how busy they are, or maybe what walk of life they're from, you automatically get a smile back, and it just changes the whole environment. So I think
sorry, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, finish.
No, I was done. Yeah.
It reminded me, when you were talking about like tuning into yourself, it reminded me this Legacy Discovery Weekend. It was a men's weekend. I facilitated many of them over the years. And one of the things that kicks it off at night, it's a weekend long thing. At night, you get all these men out into the woods, and you stagger them about 15 feet apart. and you say, okay, and they would literally just sit there and they'd be blindfolded in the dark. And the only thing you would say is, I'll be back for you. You're leaving them there, I'll be back. And they're standing there for 30 minutes in just quiet and in nature. And they're like talking to themselves, like, what are we supposed to do? Is this a trick? Is this a thing? And then you wait long enough where they go quiet. Yeah. And they're listening to themselves.
That's brilliant.
You watch some of them start crying and others just having these moments of like reflection.
Yeah.
And then they go through the full cycle of just being at peace, just quiet with nature in silence. And it's just a beautiful way to set the whole foundation for the weekend, because it just quiets the mind. But it's just amazing going through it, all the thoughts when you're tuning into yourself, the blah, blah, blah going on. And like, it just takes that long sometimes to just sit with yourself and breathe. So it reminded me of that. It is worth it. But a lot of people give up too soon. You gotta be committed to it.
Well, that's why people don't meditate. Is oh, my mind's too noisy. It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point. Is breathe and be present. Breathe and find that central focus that allows your mind to begin to relax and be present with it. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah. So Ron, one question we ask all of our guests. We're coming up towards the end of the show here. And research shows that compassionate leaders directly increase employee satisfaction and loyalty. And there's all kinds of research that even shows the impact it has on productivity and innovation, profitability. The stats are there. But we often don't talk about the impact love has on people and in business. What is your thought? Does love belong in business? Can we show more love? Can we be more compassionate? And how can leaders practice more of that in an organization? What are your thoughts?
Well, you're tapping into the hippie here.
You got to go back to that VW bus by Pendleton.
I mean, I'll just be vulnerable here and say it's everything. It is everything, because it's fear that creates all the disconnection within ourselves and others. It's fear that screws up the world. It's, arrogance is not from strength, it's from fear. All these things that we do to protect ourselves are really out of fear. And it's like love just creates a safer environment here. And as I said before, your relationship with yourself, if you have a loving relationship with yourself, that's going to be mirrored in your relationship with others. It's really what Michael's saying. And so it's what level do you want to play on? Do you want to be skulking around in fear all of your life and never know who you are? Or do you want to open up, find courage to connect with yourself and discover who you are, so you can recognize the beauty of the relationships that you can establish around you? And it's just the organizations, once they make this shift, it's just wonderful to watch, because there's a joy, there's an excitement, there's a passion that people literally give their all to these organizations. And it's not necessarily because they're, they might be building widgets, but they actually also, are helping society in some way. They, give them something meaningful that allows them to connect and commit to the organization. Money is important, but to feel safe and feel supported and feel like you're moving forward in your life is much, much more important. All the research shows that. And, certainly, without any hesitation, all the research that I do, which is extensive, clearly shows that a more conscious leader is going to create a more conscious organization, and it's going to increase by at least 40 or 50%. And my clients laugh at that, because they're seeing gains that are far, far beyond that. So and that's what got me into this. You look at the different levels of leadership in the research, and what struck me is, this top 3 levels are just more conscious people. That's a big difference. They've done the inner work, they're living mindfully, they have practices, they have significant personal transformational experiences on a regular basis. There's it's very clear what it takes to become that conscious leader, and it's open and available to anybody and everybody. So it's just, if you don't have the guts to be yourself, then don't be a leader. But if you want to really have an extraordinary life and discover who you are, then become a leader, because it's just a tremendous path of self-discovery. You're always learning, you're always growing, you're always getting pushed. And that allows you to recognize, I need to breathe into this one. I need to let go of that one and breathe into that one. And so you're always growing, whether you're an entrepreneur or a CEO or founder or whatever it might be. That's always the case, and it's the most thrilling adventure you'll ever be on, from my perspective anyway.
And that is a perfect place, I think, to cap off the show, Ron. I'm sure it's extremely gratifying for you as well. So, Ron, for our followers here at the Bliss Business Podcast that want to maybe follow up or learn a little bit more about your work and connect with you, where would you like them to go?
Just go to ronstotts.com. That's it's my website. It's got lots of good material they can download for free. They can get all the information they're looking for. It's the way to go.
Well, thank you so much, Ron, for joining us.
Yeah.
If today's episode inspired you to reflect on the role of emotional intelligence in your own leadership, share it with someone else who could benefit. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tune in again on the next Bliss Business Podcast. Thank you for being with us.